to the latest webinar in our Engineerica Education Keynote series. We are very pleased to be bringing you this complimentary presentation. For those of you who are new to us, Engineerica specializes in academic center management systems for higher education, and you may be familiar with our software applications, including Academia and AccuCampus. And of course, I want to give a special welcome to any Engineerica clients who are joining us today. And for those of you who are not yet clients, I do want to let you know we are offering a complimentary trial of our most popular center management system, which is Academia. This gives you the opportunity to use Academia for an entire semester risk-free to see if it helps make management of your center and data collection easier. If you're interested, you can send me an email at rachelc@engineerica.com. So we started this keynote series for our clients and our contacts who wanted to learn more about best practices and trends in higher education. Each month we feature a distinguished speaker to talk about hot topics in the academic support field. We are still finalizing the details for our next webinar, so we will send out an announcement when we start promotion on that. So keep an eye on your emails and our social media channels. And I also wanted to let you know about our live conference that we organize near our company's headquarters in Orlando, Florida, at which we'll host many presentations just like this one, along with software training for clients. This is going to be our third time hosting this conference. It's always a lot of fun. In fact, a lot of the presentations that we host at the conference end up being pulled from this keynote series as well. We get tons of folks who are clients, tons of folks who aren't. It's always like a ton of fun. Jenny Haley is going to be our keynote speaker for that session. And we are accepting breakout session proposals as well. So I am going to go ahead and paste that link in the chat where you can find more information about that if you are interested in joining us. All right, so a quick introduction to myself. I am Rachel Cook. I am a client success manager with Engineerica. I was previously a learning center manager for 6 years. So like all of you, I am very passionate about higher education and student success. I also have with me Nick Armstrong. He is one of our technical support specialists. He is here as my backup and also to help with any technical issues that come up on our end, the speaker's end, or yours. And I am pleased to introduce you to this month's speaker. Stephanie Walker is currently serving as an academic coach in the Engineering Center for Academic Success at the University of Michigan. She has previously served as the Associate Director of the Science Learning Center at the University of Michigan and the Director and Assistant Director of the Academic Success Center at Kent State University. Throughout Stephanie's professional career, she has supervised professional and paraprofessional staff, as well as graduate and undergraduate students in both paid employment and internship capacities. This collective experience has honed Stephanie's perspective on the supervisory experience, and we are so excited to be hosting her today. Without further ado, Stephanie, I am going to go ahead and hand control over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that warm and thorough introduction. There we are. Everybody should see slides now. So thank you very much for that introduction. That kind of covers our first landing slide here. So I'm going to move us forward to the next slide and our agenda for today. This is a workshop style session, so there is a participant guide that Rachel will go ahead and put a link in the chat for you as well, so you can click on that there. You can scan the QR code and follow along on your phone or tablet or any other device. When you open up the participation guide, link will prompt you to make a copy. And this is really important because being a workshop, your notes are your notes. So that will be a copy of the document that is yours and only yours. And you can take all the notes you want in it and follow along. Any other side comments, side thoughts, anything like that, please jot that down there. It's really set up to guide your thinking and as you process throughout this workshop. So what we're going to do today, we're going to introduce you to the work of Dr. Brené Brown. If you are not familiar, we'll do a brief introduction there. She informs a lot of my work holistically, but specifically that was supervision and how we interact with other humans, because supervision is all about relationships. And every human interaction that we have is about relationships. So this really connects to wholehearted living for yourself and for those that you are supervising and interacting with. You'll have an opportunity to take an inventory. So we're going to have about 10 minutes time to actually dedicate to yourself and take that inventory, which will provide you with real-time feedback. You'll reflect on that feedback. We're going to apply that to supervision. So you'll apply it to a scenario that you're experiencing. I'll provide you an example of my own. We'll then go into some action planning. You'll make a progress commitment, and then we'll kind of wrap it up with next steps. So thank you again for being on this adventure with me. Okay, so about Dr. Brené Brown, she is a faculty member at the University of Houston. She's known as a researcher, professor, storyteller, and author, and her work is centered on shame, vulnerability, courage, and empathy. And really those last two stemmed out of the first two. So the courage and empathy come from her work in shame and vulnerability. She teaches out of the Graduate School of Social Work, and her books are based in the work that she's done as a researcher. So what this workshop is focused on is one of her earliest books, The Gifts of Imperfection, Guideposts for Wholehearted Living. The image here is the 10th anniversary edition. I really like this version because it comes with extra like materials and workbook type prompts to guide your thinking a little bit further after 10 years of reflection on this work. But the basic tenets of the book is that a wholehearted life is one of worthiness and authenticity, that this requires us embracing vulnerability and imperfection rather than striving for unrealistic perfection. And then it provides 10 guideposts of thoughts and behaviors to let go of in favor of others to cultivate. So this really is the heart of where we're working from. And I'm going to talk a little bit about perfection. So her 10 guideposts, again, come from, are all research-based. And some of the terminology used has common language. However, how it's described throughout her work and in her book really is I think provides a fresh perspective. So perfectionism, as defined by Dr. Brené Brown, really is this 20-ton shield that we carry around in hopes that it protects us from being hurt, when in truth it prevents us from being seen. And another really impactful quote is that when perfectionism is driving, shame is always riding shotgun, and fear is the annoying backseat driver. And when I think about this in my work with folks that I'm supervising, be it professionally, paraprofessionally, or on a volunteer basis, perfectionism really is that place where I really want to put my best foot forward, where I'm not going to share a plan until I have it all figured out and I know all the details and I've really done all of that work. So I'm waiting to include others in the process until I know I'm 100% there. I shouldn't do that. So I'm not recommending that we do that. Our best work comes when we involve others and include them in that process. So really recognizing that when we see those perfectionist behaviors coming up in ourselves, we kind of look back of what am I afraid of? What fear and shame triggers might be coming up for me that I'm trying to prevent myself from being hurt when really I need to be seen with my whole team so that we can produce our best work. Okay. As we move into the workshop, next we're going to be taking that inventory. And I have one request as you do that. This is one of my favorite Brené Brown quotes, but vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And I think that truth and courage really are necessary for growth and are almost always uncomfortable from my experience. So those moments where we grow the most and we kind of have that humility, recognition of, gosh, this is how I intended this interaction to happen, but that is not at all the outcome that happened, are those moments we realize, how could I have approached this differently? What assumptions was I making, or what sort of things can I do differently so that we can have better outcomes in the future? That being both for any projects our units may be working on, but also relationships of the humans that we're working with, because we need those relationships to be strong for everybody to be able to do their best work. So throughout this workshop, there will be many reflection activities that you'll have, and I'm really going to challenge you to be vulnerable with yourself. So as you take the inventory and get some results back, if any of those things are like, ooh, that's a little painful to hear, that's okay. Sit on that, give it a moment, but make sure you give it your true self, and tell the assessment who you are now, not who you want to be. So that brings us to the inventory. I'm going to speak on this slide for a little while, so everybody has a moment to pull it up. So the inventory is very simple to do on a phone. So if you have that and want to do the QR route, please go ahead, scan it. You can start working on it while I'm talking. You absolutely can type it into another browser and use that. And Rachel's going to go ahead and drop the link to the assessment into the chat as well. So the Wholehearted Inventory was developed through Brené's work, I believe connected to University of Houston, could be wrong there, but gone through for all of its psychometric properties, kind of looking at those 10 guideposts and putting a inventory together that can help give a person feedback in real time on where they stand on each of those. It takes about 10 minutes to complete. So when I'm done talking, we're going to start the timer, and it's going to have some background music where you're going to be able to focus in on that assessment for 10 minutes. And a very important piece is that the results aren't stored anywhere. So the information is not used for anything ever in the future. And if you want them, you need to save them yourself. So you can send them to yourself, you can print them out when it's done. Yeah, that's really it. So let's go ahead and start that timer. So the music is going and we have our 10 minutes to focus in on our assessment. I'm probably gonna mute my camera for a minute while we're taking that. And then if you have any issues or any questions, please put that in the chat so that we can go ahead and address that technically. Thank you. If you are still working, please continue working. We'll get these slides back up in a moment. If you have finished, you can move forward in the participant guide and sharing again. Okay. The next section, your participant guide, gives you an opportunity to reflect on your results. So here I want you just to take a few moments while I'm talking, and you may have started this already if you finished early, but how do they resonate with you? What sounds true? What doesn't? How do they relate to what's happening in your life? So when you look at those results, you'll see a dichotomy for each of those 10 guideposts, and you'll be leaning either towards letting go of something or towards cultivating something. And that kind of just shows which side of that spectrum you were on at that moment based on how you responded to the inventory. This is an inventory that will change over time, and that's something I find really fascinating based on whatever's going on in your life and happening in the world, that if you repeat it time and time again, it will not always be the same. And kind of that, if you ever just need a check to see how am I doing, the closer your bars are towards that cultivating side, the more wholehearted living practices you're currently enabling right now. But for the purpose of this workshop, I'd like you to focus in on one area. So we're not going to look at all 10, but pick one that means the most to you. This could be an area of strength, so an area where you're already exhibiting some high cultivating behaviors, and it can be an area of growth. So if you decided to focus on something that you really need to focus more on, that letting go, keep that in mind. So pick that one guidepost that you want to work on, and we'll use that throughout the rest of the workshop today. So as we look at applying our inventory results in our supervisory work, I'm going to let Brené do a little bit of talking on blame, which is something that comes up in the workplace often when things don't go right, right? So we will hand it over to Rachel, who's going to gear up that video. It's about 3 minutes.
How many of you are blamers? How many of you, when something goes wrong, the first thing you want to know is whose fault it is? Hi, my name is Brené. I'm a blamer. Let me just tell you this quick story. So this is a couple years ago when I first realized the magnitude to which I blame. I'm in my house. I have on white slacks and a pink sweater set, and I'm drinking a cup of coffee in my kitchen. It's a full cup of coffee. I drop it on the tile floor. It goes into a million pieces, splashes up all over me. And the first, a millisecond after it hit the floor, right out of my mouth is this: damn you, Steve. Who is my husband? Because let me tell you how fast this works for me. So Steve plays water polo with a group of friends. And the night before, he went to go play water polo. And I said, hey, make sure you come back at 10, because, I can never fall asleep until you're home. And he got back like at 10:30. And so I went to bed a little bit later than I thought. Ergo, my second cup of coffee that I probably would not be having had he come home when we discussed. Therefore, and so the rest of that story is I'm cleaning up the kitchen. Steve calls, caller ID. I'm like, hey. He's like, hey, what's going on, babe? What's going on? So I'll tell you exactly what's going on. I'm cleaning up the coffee that spilled all, like dial tone. Because he knows. How many of you go to that place when something bad happens, the first thing you want to know is whose fault is it? I'd rather it be my fault than no one's fault. Because why? Why? Because it gives us some semblance of control. But here, if you enjoy blaming, this is where you should stick your fingers in your ear and do the na thing, because I'm getting ready to ruin it for you. Because here's what we know from the research. Blame is simply the discharging of discomfort and pain. It has an inverse relationship with accountability. Accountability, by definition, is a vulnerable process. It means me calling you and saying, hey, my feelings were really hurt about this, and talking. It's not blaming. Blaming is simply a way that we discharge anger. People who blame a lot seldom have the tenacity and grit to actually hold people accountable, because we expend all of our energy raging for 15 seconds and figuring out whose fault something is. And blaming is very corrosive in relationships, and it's one of the reasons we miss our opportunities for empathy. Because when something happens and we're hearing a story, we're not really listening. We're in the place where I was, making the connections as quickly as we can about whose fault something was.
I love this video. It's actually one of my favorite Brené Brown tools and resources, and I use it as a refresher often. Because particularly in supervisory work, how often are we looking at what were our goals for the whole year? We're directing a center, we're directing a team, we're leading something, we want something to get accomplished. And if we're not there at the mark, it's really easy to say at the end, it's really easy to kind of jump to, well, gosh, who dropped the ball? Really recognizing if that's ever coming to mind, we're completely missing the point. So what fell through in the process? What could we have done differently to have a different outcome? And were there any warning signs perhaps that we missed along the way? And I really take to heart that as a leader in an organization, and particularly in a supervisory experience, when you have responsibility over another person, when it comes to performance evaluations and those sorts of things, recognizing if something didn't turn out the way that it should have, what could I have done it differently? What agency do I have in that, so that my staff, my team, my unit can be better equipped for a more positive outcome in the future. And this is kind of brings back that quote, when a flower doesn't bloom, you fix the environment in which it grows, not the flower. But recognizing if outcomes are not the way that we want, look at all the things that are contributing towards that. What are our relationships with the humans involved, with the other units involved, with the resources that we have, with the timing, with the tone of communications? There's so many things that go into the success or not of an initiative that a learning center is putting out there. There are so many other questions that are far more impactful than who dropped the ball, whose fault was it? So now I'm going to give you 5 minutes to think about a situation in your own supervisory experience. So this could be with any human that you supervise. It could be a volunteer. It can be a member on the team that you're responsible for. So the formality of the supervision is very fluid. But think about a current situation that you're facing. Really take a moment to define what is that problem and situation. List specifically who's involved. Pay attention to the power dynamics. So do we each have equal footing in our organization? Does one person's voice potentially carry more weight in some spaces and or less weight in some spaces? So where may voices need to be elevated or perhaps quieted a little bit? and ultimately, what's the desired outcome? Like, what do you want to happen in the situation that is not happening the way you want it to happen right now? So I'll give you 5 minutes to focus in on that, and really give it the time so that you can use that to create your action plan as we move forward. Okay, hopefully you've got those parameters well defined. I'll be taking back ownership of the screen, so you'll see those slides again momentarily. And provide some example just for some context as we move into the next one. So one of the first formal leadership positions I had was a mid-level position within a learning center. And as part of the onboarding process, staff needed to train me on what it is that they do, the folks that I was supervising, so that I could understand their roles and what they needed. And I was really excited on this for the learning perspective, but didn't quite recognize that this was burdensome on staff, and that folks were perhaps wanting somebody to come in more familiar with what was going on in the unit, and not having that outside perspective. So it created some challenging trust dynamics within the team. Who was involved was myself, the folks I directly supervised, as well as the folks they supervised, are all kind of impacted in this scenario while we're getting to know one another and work together. What I wanted was a cohesive team that trusts and supports one another, and an environment where everybody feels like they're supported to be their best selves. But that really wasn't what I was seeing in the way that we were processing. So caution, this is where the vulnerability part comes in, to keep in mind to really think openly and honestly is what I'm going to ask you to do. But I'll share kind of an example from me. These are the questions that I'm going to be asking you next in your reflection activity. But to take that guidepost that you selected to work on, and for my example, it was letting go of what people think and cultivating authenticity. But apply that guidepost to your situation. So how might you be getting in your own way of having the outcome that you desire? And for me in this instance, I was very new to formal leadership, and formal roles and hierarchies, honestly, I don't relate well to them, right? Like I acclimate more to like the Hawaiian circle philosophy of leadership, where people come into the middle when they have something to share, and everybody's valued leader within the team, regardless of roles, and we just have different responsibilities based on what our roles are. I wasn't operating that way. I was coming in from the leader should behave a certain way. I should systematically be doing the same things with all staff members, and that really wasn't working. So by taking a few steps back and thinking, what would authentic Stephanie do? What naturally would Stephanie do? Would be a far more individualized approach. So that was what I did. I looked and kind of thought through, what does each person need in their interactions with me and my interactions with them. For some, I was doing a whole lot of website research to realize what is it actually that the program that you run that I was unfamiliar with, and making sure that I did my due diligence before meeting with them, so that I wasn't asking them questions I could find out myself. Because that was coming across as very insulting. And for others, it was, really digging deep in with probing questions on what do you want out of your work. You may have been in the role for a while or kind of ready for your next step, but weren't really thinking to share that with your brand new supervisor who's just getting her feet underneath her. So realizing that the meetings individually went differently, but then the group format, kind of prepping everybody with what to expect and giving everybody space to lead in certain points, really shifted how we were functioning as a team. But that started with me reflecting on how am I contributing to this not working the way I want it to, and what can I do differently so that our team gets back to that desired result of that cohesive unit where everybody really is feeling supported and able to do their best. So we're going to give you one more 5-minute block where you can answer those questions. So looking at the scenario that you posed just a moment ago, now you've got 5 minutes to go ahead and think, how might you be getting in your own way? And how could you engage differently? And that's really going to feed into the action planning point. So we'll start that 5-minute timer, get that going, and meet you back in 5 minutes. Thank you. that I think is the hardest work to be done throughout this session is that activity block. So I really appreciate your time and attention on it. As we pull it together to wrap it up and make our action plan, I'm actually going to let Brené lead on that, and we'll take it away with this next video.
So I get out my laptop and I do a search for who was president in the United States during the Downton Abbey era. Have you ever done that? Like you're numbing with TV or a movie, and so when it's over, you just like stay in that space by like learning more about the actors and what's going on. I've been doing this long enough to know this is like, you're laughing with me, not at me. So I put it in, and Theodore Roosevelt comes up, and a quote comes up. And I read it, and this is what it says. It's a quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne, and a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech. And this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I've spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. The second thing, this is who I want to be. I want to create. I want to make things that didn't exist before I touched them. I want to show up and be seen in my work and in my life. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, if courage is a value that we hold, this is a consequence. You can't avoid it. The third thing, which really set me free, and I think Steve, my husband, would argue has made me somewhat dangerous, is kind of a new philosophy about criticism, which is this. If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. Period. That's it. If you have constructive information, feedback to give me, I want it. And I'm an academic. I'm hardwired for wrestling around with stuff like that. If you say, hey, you forgot all this literature, or hey, you should have done this, or terrible sentence construction over here, like, let's do it. I love that. But if you're in the cheap seats, not putting yourself on the line, and just talking about how I could do it better, I'm in no way interested in your feedback.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and bring back the slides. There was a question of, is there a link to the video? And that is in the resources on your participant guide. So all the videos are linked there, and those resources are available for future use. I realized that we are getting close to the 2 o'clock hour. This was booked until 2:30. I was wrapping up most of the content within this first hour, but some may need to drop off for other meetings and such. So if that is you, please just come back to the participant guide and fill out those last couple of activities. Promise it's worth it, and we're very near the end and putting the hard work you've done so far to task for future. So our progress commitment is what comes next. And this is where the Man in the Arena speech really comes to heart for me. And as I look at my own practices with staff that I supervise and individuals that I work with, how am I bringing my best self to work? And how can I behave differently so that our teams can have the outcomes that we're hoping to have? Recognizing I can't control everything, but I have influence on myself. So looking at the work you've done so far, I want you to think about one commitment that you can make, and this can be a daily commitment or a weekly commitment, because this is kind of the only place in the guide where you're going for an either or activity. But I want you to write it down. So think about something that you're going to do differently. So if this is something that either the daily or the weekly is likely going to come up, but if you notice that you're having an issue with tardiness or something like that, is there something you can do differently that makes the morning more enticing or more fun, or something where you're there to greet folks and say hello, or you have a snack in the morning or something available for folks, but something you can do on the daily that's little and also helps kind of bring some team cohesiveness together. For the weekly one, is that something like maybe you have supervisory weekly meetings with your staff? So you want to try something different on your one-on-ones. So maybe you, like me, were applying the same approach to everyone and realizing it's working for some and it's not working for others. So maybe you want to have a new approach that you want to try, or a different way of, note taking or activity tracking or goal tracking with your staff and your team that would naturally happen at that weekly occurrence. So think through either the daily or the weekly, but from those things that you decided in the last activity and kind of brainstormed how you could behave differently, write it down. We all know from that simply writing something down makes it more likely to actually happen. So that is our first step. Our second step is to keep track of it. So in that guide, there is a grid if you're doing it on the daily path for 32 days, 32-day commitment. I imagine many are familiar with. It is backed by research. I'm forgetting whose at this point, so I apologize for not citing that. But human behavior is really hard to change. So from psychological theory, that if we're really trying to change our habits, we need to pay attention to that. So if we set the intention to do something for 32 days, exercises, so if it's going for a walk around the block or something like that, you set the intention, you check in with yourself every single day. Did I do it or did I not? It's not, you're not berating yourself if you didn't. It's just a reality check of did it happen or did it not? And if it didn't, do I want to set the intention to do it again the next day? Once you do that for 32 days, at the end, you're not going to need to remind yourself as much. It kind of becomes a habit. It's just now your thing. Or if it didn't work, it's not, and that's okay. We can try a different thing. For the weekly commitment, I put it in for 15 weeks. It's basically the cadence of a semester, a fall or a winter, or kind of the duration of spring and summer kind of put together, depending on how your institution defines terms. But that for throughout the course of the semester, that gives you progress to make with your staff. So thinking through, did I do that for those each week? Put it in a place that is helpful for you. The daily one is really helpful in, on your bathroom mirror, in a paper planner if you still keep one of those. But, Google Calendar or Microsoft Calendar reminders are also really helpful. You can set them private to yourself, and particularly for the weekend ones or week-long ones, those are probably a better place to keep track of that because they're not as consistent, constant, I guess they are consistent in tracking. But the beauty of it is that once you do it once, you can do it again for something else. And I would encourage you, to the extent possible, to take it a step further and share it. Let your team know what you're working on and that you're trying to grow. That opens up vulnerability, absolutely, 100%. And it brings a community of folks there to support you in that change, and also to provide feedback in the event that perhaps the direction that you think is best for your growth might not really be what your team needs, and it opens the door for them to share that with you. Multiple perspectives makes things stronger. But with that, keep in mind that the feedback that you get is a gift. That's why we have a present on this slide to remind me of that. So particularly when you ask folks to share information with you, to really take that, listen, take it to heart. Recognize that you don't need to respond in the moment. So particularly if that feedback is kind of hard to hear, to say, thank you. I really appreciate you sharing that with me. And I'm going to need a little bit of time before I can respond. I'm going to need to digest that, and that's totally okay. Make sure you come back to it though. Give them the respect of following through when they've kind of gone out on a limb and were vulnerable to share something with you that might be constructive. Okay. So with that then comes our future action plan revisions. So hopefully you wrote down your commitment while I was talking. I didn't set a timer for that one. But while you go through that 32-day process or that 15-week process, you're going to get feedback, whether you ask for it or not, because you're behaving differently. So people will behave towards you differently, right? And while you're processing that feedback, really think in on these questions. They really are the ones I think that help to dig deep, but what blind spots might be narrowing your thinking. So for my example earlier, I had like a vision of this is what a leader is, and it was an authentic leader to me. So I wasn't effective leading that way, and I really needed to focus in on my authenticity, and I need to do that kind of continuously when I find myself in hierarchical spaces where that leader or my leadership style may not really be embraced. But how do I operate in those spaces and make it so that my team can do their best? Was there anything painfully true to hear, and why might that be? I think that's probably the most important question, but to really reflect on that, because if something really hurt to hear, it's something that hit a shame or a fear point for you. So you're having a crunch in that area, and there's a reason why that was hard. That reason may have nothing to do with the supervisee or the person that shared that information with you or the situation at all, but really to think through, why did I react this way? And processing that will help your relationships undoubtedly. Are there any recommendations that, so if you've welcomed feedback, are there any recommendations you've been provided that like, oh, that's great, I want to try that next? Definitely looking on that. And then kind of check back in on your wholehearted inventory results and how you are showing up with your supervisees. It is one thing that, a responsibility to take very seriously, and that we all are humans. We all produce great work, but those of us that are placed in a supervisee role have responsibility for other people. And it's our job to bring the best out in them so that they can do their best work. And recognizing what else do they need to do their best work. So, is there a skill gap? Is there a training opportunity? Is there access to this pocket of people to connect with, but is there something that's holding back that person from being successful in what their job is supposed to be, that you can have a role in providing so that they can continue to grow and develop, and then as a result, your whole center does. So revise those action steps, those progress commitments based on this feedback, and it's really a collective iterative process. So thank you for the extra 6 minutes for the folks that did not need to leave straight at 2 o'clock. There are continued learning opportunities. So Brené Brown's work, she, in the Man in the Arena speech, I think one of her early books, the second one was Daring Greatly. So it's really kind of an expansion of what was learned after the guidepost. And there's many books connected to certain, to leadership, I think to parenting, to different perspectives or different situations. But the Gifts Hub is available, but you can QR code it, and there's a ton of resources. So the visuals that are available for here, and other activities to really just guide your thinking. But supervision is a growth process. It's a human relationship process, and it's always iterative. So we always have something to learn, particularly anytime we find new members on our teams or we join different teams. So something to think on. But with that, that kind of concludes my portion, but I'm available if there's any questions in the Q&A or any chat that folks wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, so please feel free to put any questions you have in the questions box. We have had a few of those come in, so let me go ahead and start with the ones that we have so far. We have someone who would like to know if you have any resources you can share regarding the Hawaiian Circle of Leadership.
Thank you. On the top of my head, no. And because there is a Hawaiian term for it that is escaping me at this moment. But really, the visual is if all humans are standing in a circle, every single person in that team and in that environment is valued, important, and critical. So in the event that you lose any space in that, your team, the size changes, the impact changes, the expertise in that circle changes. So recognizing that, but that regardless of role, somebody needs to step to the middle. So based on what's going on, is it your are you building a communication? Are you developing a training? Whatever task is at hand, different people are going to hold those skills higher. And that's not necessarily going to relate to their positional title. So it's the need at hand in making space so that those folks can come to the center of the circle when they're needed. And that can be any member, but that also every member of the team steps back into the circle and learns from the person who's at the center when it's not their turn to be at the center. So that's the basic premise of it in my words. I should know its name, and hopefully that can be in the follow-up materials, because I will look that up after.
Awesome. All right, and then we have another question. Do you have any resources or suggestions for building patience tolerance?
Part of it, so like in the middle of a conversation, just not interjecting is one thing. So one, really paying attention for the other person to finish their thought. Let them stop thinking, and then if you can like quiet or stop talking, once they've stopped speaking, quietly count to 10. I think something that it is going to distract you a little bit, but give it a moment to see, like, is their thought still rumbling in there? Like, are they actually done expressing that, or does that just when they took a breath and needed a moment? I think in the middle of a conversation, that can be really helpful. Another one that takes a long time to realize is that, like, there may be a topic for a meeting. So you're having a one-on-one with a supervisee, for example, and you intend to get through like these three topics need to happen. Like, we need to discuss them. And based on how 1 and 2 are going, you're not going to get to number 3 at some point, needing to be okay with that. So recognizing that in this moment, we're not going to get to number 3. We do need to get there by the end of the week. So we're going to have a separate, just 30-minute one where we can talk about this one topic. But let's make sure we're paying attention to the things that you need in these first 2. So that does require like self-observation in real time, which is messy. I highly recommend giving yourself space to externally process, or giving yourself permission to externally process and to say, I hear what you're saying. And I'm also recognizing this was our agenda and this is what needed to get finished and accomplished by the end of this week. So I didn't hear that last thing you said, because I was rethinking, like, do we need to restructure our meeting? Acknowledge, I didn't hear that thing you said. I know you said something and I was thinking of something else. Simply say it, because that happens to everyone. But noticing, like, letting them know, like, where your mind wandered if that happens, and you're noticing that happening, because I think particularly if there's strained relationships, it's really easy for the other person to think you went to a judgmental place, right? That you got quiet and there's something that, like, there's a criticism that you're trying to get out when that's really not happening. But then, like, your relationship breaks down even more because you're not sharing the nonverbals. I went off track a little bit there. Are there points to that question I didn't fully answer?
And then our next, this isn't a question, but it was a comment I wanted to highlight.
Yeah.
Wendy says, huge thank you to Stephanie. This was one of the best academia webinars I've attended. Inspirational, relevant, and practical all at once. I love the space she made for interactive and reflective activities. That is really good feedback, because we haven't had a lot of workshops like this. So maybe that's something for us to keep in mind in the future. Good pacing too. As someone put earlier, I'd appreciate links to the musical interludes. And I did want to say out loud that those are in the facilitation guide, but we'll include the guide and the links separately, like as their own thing, when we send out the recording. So rest assured, you'll have all these resources when we send that out. Let's see. Is this one a question? Oh,
That one does make me think. So in terms of wait time, if you're presenting or facilitating, using timers with music has changed my life. Like, so that is the one that if there is something that I know you want to pause and think on for a period of time, give a little background noise that's going to help that happening. So realize not all of you experienced that today. You saw the visual of the countdown, but that's something that you can also incorporate into a weekly staff meeting, into a team meeting of, like, I need us all to think about this for a moment. And if we think of, like, interactive activities, like a 1-minute reflection paper, or, what's your quick entry question and exit question. So as you're entering a staff meeting, like what's the one question on your mind right now? And as you're leaving, what's the one question you're leaving with? And taking those and starting and ending future meetings with that feedback are really helpful to just, you notice I speak very quickly, my mind moves very quickly, but to give yourself visual and auditory cues to slow down, stop, and think and make space for other people to do that too is really helpful.
Yeah. So this one, this is both a comment and a question. So I'm fairly new to a learning center team and recently received some evaluation feedback from a couple faculty peers about the way I show up in certain conversations. Not as collaborative, occasionally defensive. This was hard to sit with because it challenged the idealized version of myself I carry in my head. How have you worked through fear and shame resulting from feedback that's hard to hear?
Yeah. Taking the time to listen is for one. I tend to process very internally. So like how you process information, I feel like is specific to the individual, but recognizing my own patterns, I'd take that written feedback that, so assuming from an evaluation, like you have written elements of it, and sit with that. So if you know who it's coming from, if you've had limited interaction with faculty, so it really could be some certain subset, like try to think of the scenario that you were in or the conversation or the meeting where that happened. I think one, like, can I see it? Do I see like where this could have like clearly that wasn't where I was intending, but did I come out, and I'm forgetting what the specific critiques were, but I think non-team player kind of demanding. Was that it? Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Not demanding, defensive.
Defensive.
Occasionally
Yes.
defensive.
So particularly the defensive, well, I've certainly received that feedback as well. So it's a natural human reaction, particularly if we've put work into something and then like it's not well received right away, like that's human. So recognize when you're in those spaces, do you need to times if you find yourself not able to stop talking to like I think similar like the band-aid on the wrist of the like okay like it's somebody else's turn and if I notice I'm getting defensive, like let me just be quiet and listen for a moment. Another one, I think being new to the team, and there may be various levels of relationships that you've already established with other people, but I think something going back to circle of humans that you trust, so folks that you've worked with in other environments. This is not necessarily like mom and family and the folks that will think you're the best no matter what all the time, but folks that kind of know you critically and say, this is feedback that I received. Have you seen me like behave this way? Like, are there any examples where you've witnessed this in my work, and can you kind of help me understand it because I'm having difficulty processing? And that I think can help to see, particularly in prior teams that you've worked on, where that might come up, and folks may have never said something to you because they know your intentions were good, right? And they just knew you better. But then also, like there is some feedback. So going back to the Man in Arena speech, that if it's just a one-off, you said something that then seemed defensive and maybe really wasn't, then is that something that you can just kind of let go, right? Like, is it something that's not as big of a deal, even though it hurts to hear, but perhaps was just a one-time occurrence? But I'm in both of those spaces and kind of try to get more information from people that you trust and you know are going to tell you the truth. Yeah. And in that situation, like let your supervisor know, like this is feedback that I got. This is what I'm working on in these spaces. Others that are with you in those spaces, if you notice I'm getting X, like tell me, let's make a signal or something like that, so that I know to stop talking if I haven't realized I should stop talking.
That makes a lot of sense. That looks like the last question that we have right now. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that we are going to be sending out this recording with links and to everything, including slides every resource that we shared today. And if you, when you leave the session, you will be redirected to a survey. If you have a few minutes to fill that out, give us some feedback, give our speakers some feedback. That we always really, really appreciate that. I want to thank thank Stephanie so much for her time today. This was a really lovely experience, and thank you to all of you who joined us, and hope everybody has a great rest of your week. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.